Now, once you have all of your images all ready to go, and these are going to be the ones that you want to edit, the first thing that I always suggest is doing basic edits here in Aperture. Aperture has a really nice adjustment module over on the left-hand side next to the library. So if you have an image, like I have this photo here, and this is straight out of the camera. There's absolutely nothing that's been done to this image. I haven't retouched it. I haven't made any edits to it. I've done nothing. So the first thing I want to do is go over to my adjustments panel and do a couple of basic things to it. So a little bit of contrast, a little bit of exposure, maybe editing highlights and shadows if I need to. So the first thing I'll do is I might want to brighten it up just a little bit. And I'm going to go down and enhance the contrast just a little bit as well, so that I get a little bit darker blacks and darker shadows down here in the bottom half of the image. I can go in and I can adjust the black point up under the exposure adjustment module here. If I take that black point slider and I move it over to the right, it just makes those shadows a little bit more intense. And sometimes that can really help, especially if you've got an image like this one that looks a little flat. Increasing that black point is a really great thing to do. If you need to recover any highlights, or if you need to recover any shadows, this would be the best time to do that. So again, you're going to do some basic things here inside the adjustments panel in Aperture. Now for this image, I may go in and change the temperature just a little bit. I may want to cool it down a bit more so that those blues get a little bit more intense. And other than that, I don't want to go overboard in this adjustments panel. Just very simple stuff, and then I want to take it into the photo suite. Now, one of the things that is really, really great about going from Aperture into the suite, and this is something that is unique to Aperture, is before you even go into the photo suite, you never, ever, ever have to worry about Aperture overwriting your original image. It's something that's very great about Aperture, and it's very specific to the program. It always has your original image, and then it automatically creates a copy so that you're never going to destroy that original. And inside some other programs, there are a lot more chances for you to overwrite your original and to hurt your original. But inside of Aperture, you've got a really great chance to automatically duplicate your image with no worry as to hurting the photo that came straight out of your camera. Now, inside Aperture, on an Apple computer, so on a Mac, you go to the Aperture menu and you go down to Preferences. And when you go into Preferences, you want to go to the Export menu. And this Export tab right here allows you to choose the external editor file format. So this is what Aperture and the photo suite are going to copy your image as. So you've got a couple different options when you open up this menu. You can either swap it over to a TIFF, or you can change it to a PSD file. And I tend to like to use PSD so that I have access to all of my layer information and all of my masks. And you can choose 8 or 16-bit here. But what's really great is every single time that you're going to go into the photo suite, it's going to respond with Aperture's choice and your choice as to what you want to do with your file format. And anytime that you open up an image, it will automatically respond back to this export preference. So this is really important if you're a big Aperture user. So I like to keep my images a little bit smaller. I don't need all that color information. So I'll keep it at an 8-bit, and I'll keep it at PSD. What's also really cool is you can change your external editor color space. So every single time that you open an image into the suite and you want to duplicate your file into a specific color space, you can do that here as well. And I have it set to Adobe RGB 1998, which is typically what I like to use. But you also have access to things like ProPhoto RGB, which is a larger color space, or you can swap it over to sRGB, which is a smaller web-based color space. So you actually have all of these different options before you even go into the suite. And this is important to know what you want as far as these options go. Now, another thing that's super cool about Aperture and the suite and how they interact is you also have this option right here. And it's called the External Photo Editor, and this is what automatically pops up in your plugin menu inside Aperture. And you can choose, a lot of times I see photographers put Photoshop here because they like to go from Aperture to Photoshop, and they do some other edits in Photoshop, and then they like to go back to Aperture, which makes sense. But you also have the option of putting the Perfect Photo Suite here as well. And I'll show you why that's really important in just a minute. So before we go into the suite, you always want to make sure you check out your export settings so that you know how your image is going to be duplicated and what that duplicate image is going to be. So we'll go ahead and close that. Now, when I right-click on my image, right-click, I can go to Edit with Plugin. And Edit with Plugin is where you're going to find all of the different modules that come with the suite. So we've got Perfect Layers, Perfect Mask, we've got Perfect Portrait, Perfect Resize, Perfect Black and White, Perfect Effects, and Focal Point. And you're going to find all of them in this menu, as well as the entire Perfect Photo Suite. Now, when I told you that you could select the Perfect Photo Suite and then External Editor option, this is where it's going to pop up. So when you right-click on your image, you can just select Edit with Perfect Photo Suite, and it's going to pop you into Perfect Layers, which is our kind of home base, and then you can continue editing through multiple modules. And I really, really like to do this. Inside Aperture, I've been spending a lot of time with Aperture. I've only ever used it a couple of times before about a week ago. And I was working for a photographer and he used Aperture and I had to get pretty familiar with it. And I didn't integrate it into what I was doing with my own personal work. And so I kind of let it go by the wayside and haven't used it in a couple of months. And so I picked it back up about 2 weeks ago, and about a week and a half ago, and I've just been spending all of my time learning about Aperture. And this is really, really cool because now all I have to do is just right click on my image, go to Edit with Perfect Photo Suite, and it's going to pop me into the entire suite. Now, what's great about this option is it puts you into Perfect Layers first, and then up in the top right-hand corner, you're going to see that you have access to all of the different modules here. So I can go through and I can go into any of these modules that I want to, and I can do a whole bunch of different edits at once. Now, in Perfect Layers, the first thing that is pretty typical for editing is you want to get rid of any excess spots, any excess trees, leaves, people, anything in your image that you don't want to be there and you need to get rid of or take out. This is where you're going to do it. So here in Layers, I've got my Layers palette, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this layer over. I want to make edits on a duplicate layer just in case. Maybe it's because I'm a little anal about my photo editing, and I always like to make sure that I have my original. Even though this is a duplicate file, it just makes me feel better to know that I've copied over and then I always can go back to my original unedited image. So I've duplicated my layer, and now I need to go in and I want to remove some of the dust spots. I want to remove this tree in the bottom left-hand corner. You'll see it right here. It's kind of distracting. So I'm going to start out using my retouch brush. It's over on the left-hand side in your toolbar. And once I've got it selected, all I need to do is just size up my brush, and I'll just start clicking over some of these spots. And if you're like me, and let me zoom in really quick so you can actually see some of these spots. If you're like me, you haven't actually cleaned the dust sensor on your camera for a little while. So most digital cameras don't actually have dust spots, but when you're lazy and have never actually cleaned the dust off of your sensor and change your lenses all the time, probably in situations where you shouldn't, you might end up with dust spots like I do. So this is a good place to kind of get rid of any little spots that might be left over on your image. And I always like to go through it, just kind of, I've cleaned my camera since I took this image. I took this image about a year ago while I was in New Zealand. So, you know, my camera's a lot cleaner now. But back then, I was running around New Zealand, and it's very windy and sandy and dirty there in a good way. And I got dust everywhere. So I'll go through and I will get rid of any dust spots that are there. Now, the next thing that I need to do is I need to remove this tree branch right here. And I can go in and I can try and use this retouch brush, and I can try and kind of like drag over it, but you'll see it doesn't do the best job. And I really want it to be exact so that you aren't paying attention to that strange little yellow spot in the corner. So to counteract that, I'm going to go in and I'm going to use something called the clone stamp brush, and it's part of the retouch brush here. It's up in the tool options bar. You'll see it. It says use clone stamp, clone brush, and I'll go ahead and turn that checkbox on, and I'll make my brush a little bit bigger. Now what the clone brush does is when I hold down my Option key, I want to choose somewhere in my image that's very similar to what's behind this tree branch. So we'll choose kind of this water that's right about here. So we'll just click on that area. And when I drag my brush over, you'll see that I have a sample of what I'm going to be stamping over this tree. So I'll go ahead and kind of line it up with some of the other waves there, and I'll just click and drag. And if it's not quite right the first time, which a lot of times you have to use this kind of clone stamp brush a couple of times, you can click in other places and kind of clean it up just a little bit. And sometimes you'll get a little bit of a repetition. So if you turn the clone stamp brush off, this is something that I always like to do, is I go through and I take the retouch brush and I get rid of some of the little areas that make it look like it's been duplicated, and I kind of fake it a little bit. So using these two different brushes together can actually give you a pretty good realistic retouch in a certain area. And this is great when you're working in somewhere like Aperture or Lightroom and you don't have access to be able to retouch really quickly. And here inside of layers, you can do it really, really easily. And I always like to do this right before I go into Perfect Effects so that I'm not paying attention to that weird tree branch in the corner, or maybe the bird that's up in the trees, or that post. This worked really well for getting rid of things like wires and like electrical poles and signs. So play around with that retouch brush. It can be really, really helpful. So let me go ahead and zoom out. And now that we've retouched the bottom left-hand corner, I want to take this into Perfect Effects. So we'll go ahead and click on Effects in the top right-hand corner, and it'll swap me over there. Now here in the Effects library on the left-hand side, this is typically where you're going to start, and you've got all these different categories that you can play around with. Now, when you're working with landscapes, you're going to go a slightly different route than if you're working with portraits. And there's actually a landscape category that I always like to start in. So we'll go ahead and click on that and we'll open it up. And these are all the different previews of landscape specific presets that we have inside Effects. So let me scroll down and I'll show you guys. We've got these things called the magic presets. And I really like these because they're specific to certain types of landscapes. So we've got Magic City, which is kind of a grungier urban look. We've got Magic Desert, which is a lot crisper and pumps up a lot of the warm colors. We've got Magic Forest, which amplifies all of the greens in the image and the blues. And then underneath, we've got Magic Ocean right here. And this pumps up all of the blues, adds a little bit of crispness to the image. And then last, we've got Magic Sunset, which is really great if you're doing sunsets. It adds this soft wash to the image and it warms everything up and it just looks great. So for this photo, I'll go ahead and select Magic Ocean and we'll just click on it to apply it. Now, it's way too strong for this image, way too strong. So on the right-hand side in the effects stack, I'll take my amount slider and just move that down to the left until it's a little less intense. And for the Magic Ocean preset, I typically like to drop it down to about 40 to 60, depending on the image. I don't like to go overboard with this preset because it starts to look a little weird, particularly up in the sky. So we want to keep this a little bit softer up there. So we'll keep that a little bit lower. Now, when combining multiple presets together, multiple effects together, there's an add button here in your effects stack. So we'll go ahead and click on that. And now that I've got an empty layer, I can add another effect on top of that Magic Ocean effect that we just applied. So on the left-hand side, I can open up another category and I can find something else that might help this image a little bit. So for this photo, I actually want to lighten up and edit just the bottom part of the image. I want to leave the sky alone, but I want to just edit the bottom here. So I'm going to go over to the brightness category here, and we'll open that up, and we'll scroll through until we find something that we really like. So I'm going to go with midtones lighter here. Just click on that and apply it. And again, it affects my entire image here, and I don't want that. So I'm going to mask out the top part of my image. The first tool that we've got is the masking bug tool, and this creates a planar or rectangular mask. So that instead of having to go through and try and draw a really nice, planar or rectangular mask, it just automatically creates one. And this can be a really great starting point when you're working in effects. If you have a horizon line pretty similar to this one, that's pretty straightforward down across the bottom part of your image, this can be really, really helpful. So I'll just click inside my image and it'll add this little bug. And you'll see that when I move these arms, it shows me the mask that it's creating with this little grid. And I can actually drag it out and change the size of it if I need to. So we're going to go down to about there. And that's looking a little bit better. If I need to hone my mask a little bit more, I also have the masking brush. So if I want to, I can go in and I can edit kind of where this is affecting my image. So on the bottom left-hand corner of my preview, so this is my preview, this is my after image right now. There's a drop-down menu here. And if I open it up, you can actually take a look at where your mask is laying. And you've got a couple different options, but I like mask red. And this is just a red overlay. The part that's red is the part that's not being affected by this layer. The part that you can see is the part where the midtones are getting lighter. So this can be a really good way to also get very customized with your mask because you can actually see the parts that you're editing and the parts that you aren't. So a lot of times when I'm doing some heavy mask editing, I like to go in and I like to take a look at this mask. Now with the brush tool, I need to clean up the bottom a little bit, but you'll see up in the top tool options bar, I have access to my Perfect brush. And this is the edge detection brush. And it bases what it's doing on color and tone on the crosshair of your brush. So you'll see inside, make my brush really big so you can see it. Inside the center of my brush, there's a little minus sign here. And the minus sign corresponds to color and tone information to make sure that I don't paint too much out of where I don't want. So let me lower the feather down quite a bit. And I'll just start, oops, we want to go the other way. We want to paint it back in. I'll just click and drag over this part of my image. And it's smart sampling all of the different colors and tones here in the water and making sure that I'm just editing out the areas that I want. Now I can also go through and I can include the mountains in this if I want to. So you have a whole bunch of different options. I created that kind of basic mask, and then I can go in and I can edit this a little bit more here as well. So I may want to include the mountains in here. And with the Perfect brush, I'm not too worried about it going up over into those clouds because it's a different color and tone as the rest of the image. So I'm just kind of clicking and dragging, and it did a really good job making that selection for me. So I'm not too worried about the edge of this mask right up here. It looks pretty good. Now let me go ahead and change my mask view back to after. And now I've got this lighter part of my image on the bottom, and this part has stayed the same. And I can turn my layer on and off here so you can actually see the before and after. And I've made this selection around these mountains here, and it's doing a pretty good job, and it's selected just the bottom part of my image. Now, what's really, really cool about these masks is that you always have the option of going back in and editing them. So if I want to go back to my Magic Ocean layer, I can go in and I can edit out and change this mask. If I don't like this one for whatever reason, if I want to omit all of these mountains, I don't think it looks very good, I can always go back in and I can actually edit them back out. So I can go through, and if I don't like the effect, I'll just click and we'll drag, and I've got kind of a soft feather going on down at the bottom. And if I was spending a lot of time, I'd probably be a lot more perfect about this. But this can be a really, really great tool to use because you always have the option of customizing this and continuing to change it depending on your image. Now, for this photo, I want to lighten up the bottom part of this image even more. And I've got my Tone Enhancer Effect Options pane popped up on the right-hand side. And I can go in and edit things like brightness. So we'll brighten up the bottom a little bit more. I can increase things like clarity to make the crispness of those waves, those ripples a little bit more intense. I can take my black point and move it over to the right to kind of increase that. or I can take my contrast slider and increase that there as well. So now the bottom part of my image is a lot brighter and it's starting to look a lot better. Now, the next thing that I want to do is go in and I want to add kind of a universal tonal contrast here. So let me click on the Add button. And in the effect options or the effect library, I always have the opportunity to also search for something. And this can be really helpful if you don't know what you're looking for. If you're new to using Perfect Effects, you can go in and you can basically just type in a word. So I know I'm looking for tonal contrast. So I'll just go ahead and type that in and it'll pop up whatever search results relate to that word. So we'll go ahead and add some tonal contrast. It's, again, way too intense for this image. So I'm going to drop that amount back down to around 50. And even still, it's a little intense up here. So I'm just going to take my brush tool and lower my opacity a little bit. So I'll go down to maybe 50%. And I'll just go through and I'll just kind of paint over these clouds right here. And it kind of softens that contrast up on the top part of my image, but it still keeps most of the tonal contrast. So the last thing that I want to do is I want to change the tone of this image. It's a little too aqua down here and I want it a little bit more blue. So I'll go ahead and click on the Add button. And I'm going to go to my Effect Options pane right here. And I've got an effect drop-down menu, and I can actually customize my own effects. So I selected a color enhancer effect. And you'll see I have access to this color range drop-down menu. So it's separated the image into different color channels, and I can go through and edit each one of these separately if I want to. So I'll go down to Aqua, and I'll take that slider, and if I move it over to the right, the aqua starts to get a little bit more blue. If I move it over to the left, it gets more green. So this can be a great way to change around some of the colors in your image. So I'm just moving it over to the right to change the hue of that aqua tone, make it a little bit more blue. I can up the saturation if I want it to be a little bit more tense, and then I can also lighten and darken that color as well. And this can also be a great way to selectively burn and dodge or lighten and darken color channels in your image. So I basically customized this color enhancer tool just for this image. Now, the last thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to save this as a preset. I went through and I've got my original image right here. This is with absolutely no adjustments to it. Some really basic, really basic aperture adjustments. And then here's my after image. It's a lot more intense. The colors are a little bit more interesting. We've got some contrast in there, and it's not quite as soft and fuzzy straight out of the camera, which is something that drives me crazy. So I want to make sure that if I upload another image of the same lake, or I upload another image that has a similar style to it, I want to be able to reuse all of these different layers again. So Magic Ocean, my mid-tone slider, adding tonal contrast, and enhancing the aquas and the blues in this image. So I'll go to my preset menu and say Save Preset, Enhance. We'll go ahead and give it a name. So I'll call it Enhance Blues Ocean Landscape. So I'll give it a name. We'll place it in a category. I'll pop it in Landscape Presets. I can give it a creator and a description if I want. And then once I click on Create, it pops over to my presets menu or library here on the left-hand side. And you'll see I've got a whole bunch of different categories here. So open up landscape presets, and we've got blue skies. We've got this one that we just created, Enhance Blues Ocean Landscape. We've got landscape preset with border. We've got this ocean preset, which is really intense. So I've got all of these different landscape-specific presets that I can use and I can play around with. And what's great about presets, and why I recommend that you use presets all the time, is it's kind of like saving your work. So when you pop this back, when I go ahead and click Apply, which I'm going to do, it's going to pop me back into Perfect Layers, and it's going to take all of these different effect layers and squish them together and put them in one Perfect Effects layer inside Perfect Layers. That's a lot of the word layers in one sentence. But you can't go back into effects and re-edit all of these different effect layers. So you'll see right here on the right-hand side, Here's my brand new Perfect Effects layer. It squished all those together and made it into one. So by saving it as a preset, if I decide that I don't like this, I can go back in and I can go in and tweak that preset again. So it really is kind of like saving history inside Perfect Effects. And on my personal studio computer where I do all of my editing, I have hundreds of different effects. I use them, I trade them with friends, I trade them with coworkers. I download them off of people's website. There are a lot of people who create really cool presets, and I download them that way. And they take up next to no space whatsoever. So using presets is a wonderful way to streamline that workflow inside Effects, and it always makes sure that you have a saved version of the changes that you made to an image. So once I go ahead and click on Save, it's going to go and save my brand new PSD file, because we made that preference inside Aperture. We'll go ahead and close that, and let me go back to Aperture here. And here is my brand new image and my original image. So I've got my two different versions here. I've got one that's a little bit more intense and one that's still kind of the flat original image. So it's really, really great inside of Aperture because I've got this brand new PSD file, this new version, and I'm not worried about it destroying the original image. Now, the next thing that I want to talk to you about is basic portrait editing. And then we're gonna go ahead and we're going to move on to Perfect Layers and Perfect Mask. So let's start with Perfect Layers and Perfect Mask. I like that so much better. So there are a whole bunch of different ways that you can work with layers and mask. And what's really, really great is, what's really, really great about layers and Aperture is you can combine multiple images of your own. So we went and, let's see, I don't have any very interesting skies. We've got this one right here. So I have this sunset sky and I really like it, and I want to use this as a background for another image. So I can select two different photos together. So we'll choose this image and we'll choose this photo of a bride. And if I right click and go to Edit with Perfect Photo Suite, with those two images selected, it goes into Perfect Layers and adds them as separate layers. So I can go in and I can use this brand new sunset background as the background inside this photo of a bride. So you can use your own images and combine them together very easily. And this is a great way to create composites if you're interested in creating composites. So that can be really fun. So if you want to combine multiple images together and kind of move them around, and you can change shape and size, and you can brush them out and change blending modes and opacity, you have access to all of that here inside Perfect Layers. Now for this image, what I need to do is I need to resize this background layer. It's huge. So I'm just going to go over with that sunset layer selected. I'll choose my transform tool, and I'm just going to go and I'm going to click, and we're going to resize it so that it fits about the same size as this foreground image. And you can move it around and resize it and reproportion it, or if you hold down the Shift key, it'll save the proportion of the image. So you can do it both ways, but I'm just going to go through and kind of size it so that it looks about the same as the bride image. And once I'm done, I'll click Apply. Now we've got all this excess space here that I really don't need. So I'm going to go up to my bride image, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose the crop tool. And all I need to do is go up to the top right-hand corner and choose Fit to Layer. And what that does is it sets the crop size to the bride's image layer. And now when I go ahead and click on Apply, it's going to trim whatever excess background from the sunset layer that I don't want. So I don't need that. So it's going to trim all of that out. And now everything is correctly sized and fits with my bride layer. So now that I'm all set, I've got my brand new background layer that doesn't really work with this image. I really need to get some new sky layers of my own, which actually leads me to talking about something else. So if you have a lot of sky layers like I do that don't really fit with your images, this has the moon in it, which obviously does not work too well with this photo because she's standing in the sun and she's very happy that she's standing in the sun. So it makes absolutely no sense. So if you don't go out and shoot a lot of skies, we also have an extras category here, which allows you to go in and add one of the backgrounds that we include in the suite. And this can be a good way to play around with layers and mask. If you don't have access to a lot of skies, you can use one of ours to kind of test it out and see how it works. So this is typically what I recommend, especially for people who are new to layers and masking. Have a little bit of fun and use our stuff first so that you're not using your images and you're getting frustrated. Try one of ours. So we've got the backgrounds category open here, and I'm going to open it using the Quick View browser, which is new with 7.5. And it's just this little icon to the right-hand side of any of these category names. And what it does is when I click on it, it opens a full screen browser of all of the different images or effects or presets or downloads, whatever might be in the suite that has access to this Quick View browser. You can go in and you can have a nice big full screen view. So for this image, we're probably going to go with something that's a little less. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this Skies 14. So I'll click on that. And it's going to ask me whether I want to add this as a new layer, which I do. So we'll click on Add. Now, obviously, this image is huge. There is a lot more information here. So if I go up to the Transform tool, and I click on the Fill button in the top right-hand corner, it resizes my sky layer to fit my bride layer. So this can be super useful if you have a huge image that you want to use as a background, you need to shrink it for your foreground photo, you can just fill it into the entire frame. So now that I've got it filled to the same frame, I just need to drag it into place so that it's kind of, I want some of these small interesting clouds down here, I want them to be right up near where the edge of the mountains are. So we'll go ahead and change that and size it into place, and we'll go ahead and click on Apply. Now, the next thing that I need to do is click and drag it underneath my bride layer, and now I have a sky that's a lot more compelling. Let me delete that strange sunset layer because that doesn't work. So now I'm ready to mask. I've got a brand new background layer, I've got that new sky layer, I've got my image all set to go. That's when I go over to Perfect Mask. So we'll go ahead and click on Mask. Now, the way that Perfect Mask works is by color segmentation. So it takes a look at your image and it goes, oh, hey, there are a whole bunch of colors here. Let me separate them all down and try and figure out which ones relate to one another and which ones don't. And from a development standpoint, I can't tell you how they do it. Personally, I think it looks like magic. But from a photographer's standpoint, it makes sense because when you're looking out into the world, everything is made out of color. And you're staring at the world and you're looking at the differences between the blue that's in the ocean and the blue that's in the sky, and the blue that's in that person's dress and the blue that's in her eyes, and the blue. There are so many different shades of colors. And so what this program does is it tries to separate everything down and segment it into colors. So for this image, it seems like it would be pretty easy to just kind of remove this whole background here. So let me just click and we'll drag across the background with my drop brush tool. And you'll notice that it removed way too much information in her face. And it also removed some of the blue tint that was in her arms. And we don't want that. So I'm going to undo that change. And I'm going to go up to my tool options bar here. And this is very important to masking. If you're having problems in Perfect Mask, this is always what I suggest you work on and you change. Inside Mask, I've got my drop brush tool selected, and I'm going to lower my segment size down to about 2 or 3. Now, what that does is it allows the program to be more specific about the color samples you want to remove or the segments that you want to remove. And I'm going to lower my refine to refine that down just a little bit more. And now I'm going to click and drag over my background. And it's gone through and it's saved a lot more information in her face. The line along the edge right here, along where the mountains are, is a lot cleaner. So I feel a lot better about that. And it looks like the edge is pretty good. And I can zoom in a little bit and I can take a look. And if there are any areas that I need to save or fix up, I can do that. But for the most part, This is looking pretty good. Now I'm just going to go ahead and click on apply, and it'll pop me back into Perfect Layers. And now what I can do is I have both of these layers separated. And this is one of the coolest parts about working with multiple layers, is I can edit each one of these separately. So what I need to do is the background, that sky layer, is completely in focus. I can see all the edges of those clouds, whereas the background of this image has dropped out because it was a lower aperture, and it looks really soft, and it doesn't match this sky at all. So because these are on separate layers still, I can edit each one of them separately. So I've got my sky layer selected, and when I go ahead and click on focal point or focus up in the top right hand corner, I'm just going to go through and I'm going to soften that background. And you'll notice you've got your masking bug that's right here, your focus bug. And when I click and drag it around, even though it's over the foreground here, it's not affecting it, it's only affecting the sky layer. So I can go in and I can change the amount of blur that's in the background. I can make it really intense. I can lower that down a little bit more because it's way too intense. So let me lower it down to about maybe 10. That looks pretty good. I can change things like the highlight bloom. If I want to make the sky in the background pop out a little bit more, I can do that. I can edit the brightness or the contrast of just the background here, which is really nice. So I'm going to brighten it up just a little bit so it's nice and vibrant. I can also change the contrast if I want to intensify the color and the contrast in the background. So again, this is a really, really cool way of working with different layers, is I can access this background layer and it's completely leaving the foreground alone. So play around with this idea. I'll go ahead and click on apply, and it's putting me back into Perfect Layers. And now I've got my original sky layer, my focal point sky layer, and my image layer. Now, the last thing that I need to do is I want to crop down my image one more time. You'll see that these two different layers are of a different size. They were a little bit bigger than my original image, and so I need to crop everything down and cut all of that excess off. So I'm just going to select my image, that top layer with the bride, and this time I'm going to choose something called, we call it our trim tool, and all it does is it just trims over your image and it trims off the excess that's there. And this is a really cool tool to use if you don't want to affect your image size at all. So all I'm going to do is just click and drag over my image and click the apply button. And what it's going to do is it's going to make sure that these two bottom layers don't have any information that's on the outside of the central image. So once I'm all set and I'm ready to go, the last thing that I want to do is go up to my layer menu. And this is really, really important. If you go up to your layer menu and you choose new stamped layer, what it does is it merges all of these layers together and it creates a composite layer. So this is a great way to go in and edit your image universally after you've combined two together. So compositing is really easy, and then merging them and creating this new stamped layer means that I can apply, for example, a black and white effect to it. So if I want to, I could pop in a perfect black and white, and I could go in and add a really cool black and white edit. So this new stamped layer under the layer menu is a great way to merge your image together without destroying your original photos. So these are two photos that I don't want to destroy. I may want to go back and edit at another time. And if you click on the merge button, it just squishes everything together. So always go up to the layer menu and go down to new stamped layer. Now let me go ahead and let's close out of this image. And I want to move on and talk to you about Perfect Resize. And when you're inside Aperture and you've got an image that you want to print, and there's obviously a way that you can go through, and if you've got an image that you really like, I love these sheep. I took this image while I was in New Zealand. There are a lot of sheep in New Zealand. If you've ever been, lots and lots and lots of sheep. So they like their wool. So when you've got an image, you can go ahead and you can go through and you can print it inside of Aperture. And it's got this print window. It's very, very easy. This is an 8 by 10 sheet of paper, or technically it's an 8.5 by 11, but you know, I'd print it down and print it on an 8 by 10 image. So I can print through here, and I've got contact sheets and basic standard sizes in here. However, this image itself is not as large as I actually want it to be. And most of the images that I have, I want to be able to print a lot bigger. So let me go over and let's actually choose an image. We'll choose this photo here. It was a photo that was taken in New York. And let's pop this into the photo suite, and I'll show you some quick things that you can do as far as editing goes. So let me go back to my browser here, and we will right-click on my image, edit with the Perfect Photo Suite. Now, before we go into Perfect Resize, I'm actually going to swap this over to a black and white. I want to add kind of a grungy black and white effect to it. So I just clicked on Perfect Black and White, and I'll go over and let's do 21st Century Modern Digital. And we'll play around and try and find something in here. So I'll just click on an effect, see if I like it. We'll try another one, the gritty grunge. This is a lot closer to what I want. I want that really cool grungy look to it. So I'll apply a black and white effect here. Let me lighten my image back up a little bit. And let me add a little bit more contrast. And I'm going to leave the border on. Now I'm ready to go. I'll click apply, get out of Perfect Black and White. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on resize. So as you can see, it's nice and quick in between all these different modules here. I can swap to black and white, add a filter, swap back to layers, and then go over to Perfect Resize. So I can change these very, very quickly. Now inside Perfect Resize, the most important dialog box in this entire thing is on the right-hand side, and it's called Document Size. Very, very important. Document Size is telling you what size your image is at this moment. So my image is 13.8 by 9.2. So it's about 14 by 9. This is not a very large image. And it was taken on I don't remember what camera it was taken on, but it was not a very big camera. I have, a nice studio camera. And then this was taken kind of a dinkier, smaller, shoot around the city kind of a camera. So the resolution is only at 180, which is not huge. I could print this, small, and it probably wouldn't really make a difference. But I want to upsize this to about maybe 17 by 22. And 17 by 22 is a pretty popular paper size now, as is something like 16 by 20. So those are two larger sizes that a lot of people seem to print nowadays. So you've got a couple different ways that you can do this. The first is in the preset menu here. I can go down, and you'll see I've got all these different categories, and I can just choose straight from a paper size. So I know I want to print it 17 by 22, so I'll go ahead and select 17 by 22. Now, what is really important about this is if you're editing images that have borders on them, using these preset sizes may cause you to have to crop the tops and the bottoms. So like this image here, it doesn't fit exactly into a 17 by 22 proportion. So this isn't going to work for me. So there's another way that you can do it just by typing in a new width or height. So if I know I'm printing on 17-inch by 22-inch paper, the height of my image maximum can be about 21 inches. So I'll just go ahead and type in 21. Make sure you have constrain proportions checked here so that it keeps those proportions correct. I'll just go ahead and type in 21. It resized my image. I'm good to go. It's now 14 by 21, which is kind of a weird size, but if you want to keep your proportions, you may have to print it some slightly stranger sizes. So it's upsized it to 14 by 21. And then to change the resolution, I can just click on this drop-down menu and we'll up it to 300 pixels per inch, which is good for just basic photo printing. So we'll go ahead and change that to 300, and my image has been upsized. There's no magic, there are no complicated steps. All you do is either type in a new size or change your preset here. Now, you also have options to a library of presets if you don't really know where to start, but you know that you print on matte paper all the time, or you like to print on canvas and create gallery wraps, you can use one of our prepackaged presets. But typically when you're doing some printing, some basic printing, I like to just stick with this document size pane. It's really nice. It has the automatic crop box that pops up if you need to crop your image down. So I'm not super worried about the fact that you know, this is a great way to upsize your image, especially if you like to add sharpening in another program. So if you like to add sharpening in Aperture before you get it ready to print, you can do that. Now, if you are interested in adding sharpening, we do have a sharpening pane here that you can just turn on. And it's, my favorite is something called high pass, and it's a slightly softer version of sharpening typically. That's how I think of it. I tend to like it a little bit more. You have access to these protect sliders, which help you protect your shadows and your highlights in your image, so it won't over sharpen either of those tonal bases. So this can be a great way to protect certain parts of your image. And then you can change the amount. You can up it quite a bit, which is way too intense, or you can keep it down nice and soft so it just crisps up the edges before you print. Now, the last thing here inside Perfect Resize I want to show you is the gallery wrap pane. And the gallery wrap pane allows you to print out your images on canvas. And when you do that, you have to take a little bit of excess canvas and wrap it around the wooden bars that you stretch that canvas around. So if you've ever seen an oil painting and you flip it around, there's a wooden frame in the back, and there's canvas that wraps around the entire frame. So what helps make photo canvas gallery wraps look so great is when you have a little bit of the image that also wraps around the edge. It makes it look nice and seamless. So by turning on the gallery wrap pane, you can add that excess edge automatically here in Resize. So if you like to print your own canvas wraps, which is actually really easy to do, you can add that excess here. Or if you ship it off to somewhere like Costco or I think Staples does canvas, or one of those office stores does canvas. But if you send it anywhere to print on canvas, you can automatically add this wrap. And a lot of times places will actually charge you extra to add that gallery wrap. So if you do it here, you can also save a little bit of money, which is pretty cool. So you could go in and you can add your wrap here, and you can change things like the thickness. So if you need at least 4 inches on each edge, you can do that. And you can also change the type of reflection that it's creating. So I do something called Reflect Soft, and it reflects your image, but then adds a soft blur to it, and it makes that seamless look a lot nicer. It looks a lot prettier. So let me cancel out of this here, and we'll close this. Don't save. And we'll go back to Aperture. Now it is about 3:50 here in the Pacific Coast. I'm based here in Portland, Oregon, so it's about 3:50 here. I don't know where everybody else is, but you know, welcome to Portland time. So I like to spend the last 10 to 15 minutes answering some questions. So if there's anything you guys want to know about that I either talked about or didn't, feel free to ask those questions now, and I'll answer as many as I can in the next 10 to 15 minutes. Don't forget that we do have free customer service. So if you want to, go to onwinsoftware.com. We have some fantastic support categories here. You can either contact us, or we have an entire knowledge base that you can search through. If there's a problem that you're having, like for some reason, you know, maybe one of the plugins isn't showing up, which sometimes happens, you go ahead and type that into the knowledge base, and that's a great way to do it as well. It also looks like there are at least 2 or 3 questions in here, but if you want to watch this webinar again, it's been recorded. So we're going to be, I did another one this morning for Lightroom users. Now I've got one for Aperture users. So we're going to be putting those up on YouTube, on our YouTube page, so that you can actually watch them later. So just in case you guys missed a little bit or had to wander off for a second to go grab a cup of tea, or I got chocolate. So, you know, that's my version of an afternoon snack. I just eat chocolate. So if you had to wander out and go grab something, this is going to be up on our YouTube page in the next probably 24 to 48 hours. So you'll be able to rewatch it again if you want. All right, let me go through some of these questions and see what I can get to in the next few minutes here. Looks like all right, so what does On1 see as future development of Aperture as compared to Lightroom? The Lightroom user base is so much larger that the world of photography centers very closely around Adobe. It's just kind of how the photo world works. And so I think that one of the things that I'm trying to do with these webinars is make sure that we still include the Aperture folks. We get a lot of people who still write into us who love to use Aperture. And one of our partners, Jacob Lucas, is an amazing photographer, sticks pretty closely to Aperture, and he uses it because he loves it. And he pairs it with the photo suite, and he's done some video training videos. He's done presets for us. He's done a whole bunch of stuff for us that's based around Aperture. So we're going to make sure that as long as Aperture is still a thing out there, we're going to support those people. It does depend on what you like. So if you're an Aperture user and you like it, then continue to use it. Because for me, I have a special workflow that I use for my personal work. So when I'm working with studios, or if I'm working as an assistant, or when I was working as a fine art printer, there were certain ways that I worked, and I like to do that. So if you're an Aperture user and you like it, I say keep using it, because we're going to keep supporting it as long as it still exists. There's a question, who's giving this webinar? My name is Liz. I work with On1 Software. I'm a software educator. So my entire job is basically to teach people, both through live training, traveling across the country, and through training videos, to make sure that everyone knows how to use the program and use it well. So that's my entire job. So you'll probably hear my voice. If you ever come to another webinar, you'll recognize the name Liz, and I'm kind of always here, and this is kind of what I do. So that's who I am. All right, so there was a question. So apply puts the edits to, does apply, when you click apply, does this put the edits together, and then does save return it back to Aperture? Yes, that is exactly how it works. So when you click apply, it will, when you click apply after going through the edit in Perfect Photo Suite. So let me show you the difference between the two. I have my image right here, and when I right click and go to edit with Perfect Photo Suite, which is exactly what I was doing, when you click on save, it will save back into Aperture. When you go to edit with plugin and you just choose a singular plugin like Perfect Effects 4, when you click apply, it will pop you back into Aperture. So there are two different ways to do that. Hopefully that makes sense. So edit with Perfect Photo Suite, when you click on apply, it pops you back into Perfect Layers, and then when you click save, it puts you in Aperture. When you go to edit with plugin and choose one of the plugins from here, when you click apply, it will put you back into Aperture. So two different ways to do it, but they both work pretty much the same. So it just depends on what you want to do. Also, if you don't have access to right-clicking, right-clicking is something that's typical for PC users. When you're on a Mac, you control click. So I just control click. I have one of those magic trackpads, so if I click twice, it right clicks, which is really cool. But you can control click on your image, and that will get you to this menu. You can also always go through the Photos menu right here inside Aperture, and you can go down to Edit with Perfect Photo Suite or Edit with Plugin from here as well. So it's the exact same menu. All right, so are there any basic tutorials? This was pretty basic. I know I kind of went a little fast, but hopefully this was pretty basic. But just in case you need some more basic training that was a little bit more simplified than this, if you go to our website and go to the Learn section, we have our training videos and tutorials here, and this is a really great way to learn how to use the suite kind of in a very baseline manner. We're working on a whole bunch of new, we're always working on new videos. So we're working on a whole bunch of new videos right now, some that are specific to Aperture users, but like we have some really nice, really basic videos in here, like how to use the Quick View browser, how to use our clone stamp brush. We've got how to launch Perfect Effects for free from multiple different programs, how to batch process. So really, really, really simple stuff here. And this can be a really great way to kind of start when you need to start from scratch and you don't really know what to do. You can access our training tutorials and videos here, and this is great.